Welcome. Welcome to the 40 portal, babe. I'm Catherine Zach. I'm your host. We're here. I am so excited about today's episode. I feel like it's hitting at a really potent moment for me, maybe for you, maybe for the universe. Um, It's funny, I recorded so many of these episodes, like every episode you've heard up until this point, except for last week's with Florida's, which if you haven't gone back and listened to that, I literally recorded it as I was getting my hair chopped off and colored about a month and a half ago. It's such a good episode, but every other episode that you've heard so far has been or was recorded much earlier this year in 2026. They were recorded in like a crazy intense literal portal moment of a few weeks where I think I recorded a dozen episodes in 2 weeks, and it was such a fun, potent time. But it's funny too, because I have to kind of be honest about something. I didn't quite know what this would become. I still don't know if I know what the 40 portal is going to become, but I love where we are. I love where we are. And it's cool to listen back to today's episode. I have a phenomenal guest. The stuff she talks about, what she shares, it's so good. It's so resonant. I can't wait for you to hear her words. I can't wait for you to hear Amber's words. But there's a moment in this episode where I talk about what I think is like the working thesis of the 40 portal, which is that passing through the portal of 40, of turning 40, of being in your 40s, of entering midlife is perhaps one of the most powerful, potent, creative, vivifying, strong, sexy, and probably terrifying. And this last part is important, I think. One of the most terrifying things in the universe is a woman who has like gone through this portal. And I don't know that it maps on completely chronologically to 40. And I also think you can just pass by the doorway of that portal and keep going without going through. I think that happens for some folks. But just to hear myself like kind of creatively iterating on that thesis as I've listened to the last, I think this is episode 14 that has come out, as I've listened to the women on this podcast and listened to your feedback and keep reading your submissions, which by the way, I have a very specific ask for you in a moment. I'm more convinced of this working thesis than ever. And like confession, ha ha ha. To me, this concept of the 40 portal at first was just this like really sexy and empowering thing. And ha ha ha, LOL. I just didn't realize that I would actually have to like whoomph, go through the portal myself. Like I was like, maybe I'll just talk about it. It feels fun. It feels fresh. I'm gonna wear a green dress to my party and like have women contribute their voices and story tell and explore archetypes and have fun conversations on the podcast. But I have to say, in the background of the last several months, like call it 6, call it 7 months, probably the last 10 months of being 40, I've been going through this like real process of transmutation in my life, like this. And it's the question of the prompt, like what have you learned and earned and burned, and it like, and also churned, I'll add that verb into it. The whole time, this thing I've been grappling with in the background, I'll talk about it later, I'll talk about it at some point. And now I've kind of like popped out on at least part of the other side of that. And boy, man, woman, do I feel different. I even think I look different. I'm like watching these episodes that I recorded back in January and February. I'm like, girl, you look so tired. And I say that with love to myself. But yeah, when you're in it, you're in it. And I'm just laughing these days because I feel like I have kind of popped up from being pummeled by the wave of the 40 portal. And I'm like, cool, I survived. Whoa, here we are. And yes, like this grit has given me so much of that like powerful terror that I was like thinking about as the hypothesis. And I love it. And I have to tell you though, the only way through is fucking through. That's it. Like you can't just have a podcast called this and be like, here I am, Yeah. Okay. So one day we'll talk about that, but not today. Today we're going to let Amber's words lead the way. But I'm just sitting here with so much gratitude for what this thing has actually become over the last 5, almost 6 months, and there's so much more to come. We'll get to 40 episodes. We will at least get to 40 episodes, and this is my very specific ask to you because these episodes are built on submissions by you, from you to my 40 portal notebook. I staple in the ones that you mail to me. If you put them in the Google Docs form, I write them in my own handwriting. This is the book I brought to my 40th birthday last summer. I need your words. You are already part of this conversation. You're just listening. If you haven't submitted yet, you need to add your voice. It is vital. And this is what Lorda said in last week's episode, too. She said, I think life's assignment for every woman should be to write a book of her own. And maybe you start just by adding a few lines to this book that we're writing together, truly, because I think that this will become a book. And the twofold prompt, I'll just speak it into this episode, and then you can click the link in the show notes to share, or just answer it in the comments wherever you listen to this podcast. YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. I'm sure there's other places, like Substack. Okay, so here it is. And this is what I said on July 24th, 2025. Commit to the bit of being yourself. I love collecting the wise words of women and creating connection through the stories we share. Please leave a little blessing in our co-created 40 Portal book. Here's the twofold prompt. If you have passed the threshold of 40 yourself, tell us what you know, trust, have learned and burned and earned. It can be short and sweet, silly and irreverent, sexy or serious. I am here for all of it. Okay, if you are not yet 40, what's an open question you're living? What longing, desire, fear, or dream do you want to put out into the universe? I'll try to do something beautiful with this little book of blessings. What a joy to be in your good company. I mean it. I want you to submit. I want you to be a part of this. You're already a part by listening, but add your voice. It is vital. It's vital, and that's how our terrifying power grows. As you'll hear in this episode at one point in response to something Amber says, I'm like, ooh, I hope this podcast gets banned. I hope we get banned because it is subversive. What we are doing. Fuck yes. Let's go. Okay, add your voice. I'll put the link down there, or just leave your answer to that prompt, whichever side of 40 you're on, in the comments wherever you listen to the podcast. Don't forget to find us on Substack. Okay, here's the episode. You got to listen. So you are just like such a singular force to be reckoned with. And I didn't like, my husband met you before I met you. And he came back with, like, this very specific, like, "I met this woman. She's the wife of, like, the guy's party I went to, and she's pregnant and she needs a midwife, and I think you definitely have to meet her." And but, like, just, like, like, specific, straightforward, like, kind of fierce recounting of, like, his interaction with you, and I was like, "Cool. Yeah, I should probably meet her." And that's, like, my first memory of you in my consciousness. Do you have a different one, or
Oh, wow. Um,
you're like,
I
"I haven't been thinking about you, Catherine."
no, I don't remember. I can't pinpoint the first time we met, and that's really funny that that was Sam's impression, but when I think of our, like, first interaction, really, I remember running into you on the playground, and you had just had George, and we had definitely met before that, but this is, like, the first one that, like, stuck, I guess. And you were telling me about what it was like going from 1 to 2 because I had just, been, I was freshly pregnant with number 2, and you were like, "It's really like it's hand-on-hand combat, like, there's no more." I remember you saying specifically, "There's no more divide and conquer." Like, one of you is with one kid, one of you is with the other kid, and that's just, like, what it is, but you were like, "We're locked in as a family now. Like, everything is about us as a family because there's no more like, you take the kid and I do this." and you were I'm saying it in a severe way, but you were saying it almost as in there's, like, a freedom in accepting that, like, this is what it is, because once you have 2 kids, you're, like, in it. And that's my recall of, like, the first conversation we ever I'm sure there were other ones, but that's the first one that's, like, stuck in my brain where I was like, "Okay," I was like, "This is someone I can kind of, like, look up to and, like, who's gonna tell me, like, what it is."
Mhm. You know what? One of the things that I'm thinking a lot about these days is what makes me feel connected to someone that I meet, and I feel like a big piece of it is like, and this is just me. This is my personality, this is my whatever. I think everyone is obviously different. But the way I can best describe it is like if we can just get right down to it and, like, go deep fast and just, like, not like, to skip over the small talk and be like, "Oh, well, actually, this is the experience," like, and I'm just gonna say it kind of matter of factly without hiding it, like, that to me is, like, that's who I wanna jive with, that's how I wanna spend my time in friendship, in relationship with people, and it almost is like an instant feeling. I don't know, what is your take on that?
I'm 100% the same, I hate small talk. I, like I went through a period where I did this thing where I really consciously especially when we first moved here, right? Because I think, you know, we moved to the Hudson Valley 5 years ago, we were kind of right behind you guys, and so you kinda have to, like, reinvent your friend group and your social life a little bit, and you're trying to figure out who your people are, um, and I think there's also, like there's an interesting thing I see playing out across my local friend groups of, like, people who had sort of like friendships of convenience, especially like during COVID, that were based on either like proximity or your kids are friends, and people kind of navigating like, is this a real friendship or not? Like, are we friends because I run into you all the time and our kids are friends, or are we actually like, are you somebody who I can rely on and connect with? I see a lot of that kind of like playing out across different social groups that I'm in. And I've always been somebody who is just, like, maybe a little too intense, but, like, I was sorry, I didn't finish that thought completely, but when we first moved up here, I was always trying to do this conscious thing of, like, when I meet somebody, I never wanna ask them, like, "What do you do?" Because that's such a boring question that's, like, loaded with, like, capitalism and bullshit. So it's like, I really tried to get in this practice of, like, asking people like, "What are you passionate about?" Or like, "What's your day been like?" Just really, like, going beyond the, like, "How are you?" "Good. How are you?" Like, "Nice to meet you. What do you do?" Like, that's all fucking surface level bullshit, and it's such a waste of time, so, um, yeah, I anyway, this is a very, very long answer to say yes. I am 100% agreement with you, and I feel like it's an indicator of, like, can you be vulnerable? Can you be real with me? Because if you can't do that in the first, like, 10 minutes of meeting me, like, what are we even doing?
Yes, and, like, that just I'm laughing because 'cause I'm like, "Oh, yeah, that's definitely you." I see that, and it's so good. But, like, so many strings I wanna tug, like, number 1, the way you articulated your dissatisfaction and, like not even dissatisfaction, you're like, "I don't have anything like, I don't wanna fuck around with that question at all." It's like, "What do you do?" And, like, I feel that way too, but I don't think I've ever articulated it as, like, powerfully and succinctly as you have. That it's like, that's just a byproduct of capitalism and really has like, nothing to do with, like, who we are, or some things to do with, but just not the power that we give that question.
It's
And
just
one of the
almost never the most interesting thing about a person, and I feel like we were really another thing that we have in common is our, like, commitment to commitment and then abandonment of achievement culture
'Cause,
and
like, we're in
careerism.
this dance, like, we're in this dance, and that's, like, what I was thinking about for you too, is, like, we've had many stories in our, like, answer to that question so far, and there's probably gonna be a bunch more, and I think you're a really good example of this concept that I have already talked about on earlier episodes of the podcast of, like that I borrow from Mary Catherine no, 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 yes. Oh god, I've totally lost her name. Is it Catherine? Well, I'll find it. Um, Composing a Life, Mary Catherine Bateson, and she talks about the concept of discontinuities in a woman's life, and it's like this idea that everything is a circle and a cycle. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end. And yet we're like raised in this narrative of like straight linear paths, which is very like capitalist, right? And like that has never fit for me. And every time I've tried to shove myself into that like achievement, straightforward linear path, that has just ultimately led me to an abandonment of it, like you articulated. Cause it's like, it's just not reflective of the experience of like that things start, they have a middle, and then they have an end. And some discontinuities you choose, like moving to a new location, and some you kind of choose, like becoming a parent, or maybe you didn't choose that, or it doesn't feel like a choice to you, your decision to do that or not. And some things like COVID or whatever just come out of the blue and whap you. So like there's I don't know, there's a lot of things that are present in just your little answer that I feel really interested in and curious about.
Yeah, I mean, I started doing this a long time ago, but I kind of tried to make it a practice, and then my husband and I would make it a game. Like, when we would go to parties or we would, like, meet new people, we would make like, the best part of the party is leaving the party and then going home and talking about the party. Um, but we would make a game, we would count how many times people asked us what we did, and then we would come up with our own list of what we asked instead, and it was, like, kind of like a thing, like, can you, like who can have the best, like, question, or who can come up with, like, the better question to ask, and it was sort of like a challenge to each other, like, can we get through a whole cocktail party without asking a single person what they do? Um, because especially in New York, I feel like it's very different up here, but especially in New York, it's so, like, like, networky and, like, especially working in media too, right, for a long time, it's very much like there were people who I felt like were only trying to get close to me because they felt like there was a certain level of access there, and that's like, ugh, I hate that. Um, so, yeah, I just wanted to, like, get away from that, and so this became almost like a practice of, like, how can I subvert this in, like, every social interaction?
That's really good. I'm gonna take that as our segue into the 40 portal questions because we're hovering right around it. And I'll combine the first two. One is what is your name, and your pronouns, but also go deeper. Tell us a story about your name. I'll start there. I'll start there. Just tell
Okay,
us your name.
my name is Amber Van Moessner, my pronouns are she, her. A story about my name is that my parents didn't know my sex when my mom was pregnant, and, they couldn't decide on a name. If I was a boy, they were gonna name me Byron, which is really funny. Um, and then they had some other A names they liked Anastasia and Adrian. But then I was born with this, like, little poof of red hair. And my parents were factory workers, so they were, second shift workers. So before they went to the factory, they would wake up and watch Days of Our Lives. Um, and my grandparents were big soap opera people, like, this is, like, a huge cultural white trash thing in my family. And there was a character on Days of Our Lives named Amber. And so when I was born, they hadn't come up with a name yet, and they looked at my little poof of red hair and thought about their love of Days of Our Lives, and they named me Amber.
Wow. I didn't know that. And I also I don't know that I know that character, but I had a babysitter that watched the shows watched the
She
shows
was, like,
too.
phased out by the time that we were, like, old enough to watch Days of Our Lives, but I think they've recently brought her back because it's still on.
Wow, that's fascinating. Do you feel like your name like, that's kind of part 2 of the question, it's like the story, or like, how does that map onto your identity now at your age? You're not 40, but that's that in a minute.
Almost. I don't know. I always didn't like it when I was a kid because it was different, and I think, like, I just wanted to be like Ashley. A million Ashleys. No shade to Ashleys. Um, but I didn't like it as a kid because it was different, and then I think as an adult, that is why I like it because, like, I don't know, like, another Amber, and so that's kind of fun to be the only Amber, um, but I don't know, I also, like, in terms of identity, like, I've always told that story kind of as, like, a joke about, like, "Haha, my family is, like, white trash and loves soap operas." Um, and, couldn't like and also, like, now that I'm an adult with children, it's, like, unfathomable to me that you wouldn't have a name picked out, but I'm just also, like, a type A nut job, so, I just can't imagine, like, those whole 10 months being like, "Huh, can't really put my finger on this one."
Oh my gosh. Well, I think you're getting to, like, a larger thing too of, like, maybe what we learn about our parents as we become parents ourselves, if or whatever, as we get to become adults, like, just understanding that differently from the eyes of being a child too is so wild to me. But I'm gonna keep going because, like, the next question is kind of like what we were talking about earlier, and it is, how would you introduce yourself if job titles, accomplishments, and labels weren't part of your answer? Because I hate that question too. What do you do? Like, what do you wanna share about yourself that doesn't lead with that?
Hmm. I would say I have, like, a dramatic answer and a less dramatic answer. Like, I think, like, if I get to, like, the essence of who I am, I would say I'm, like, a wounded warrior. That's sort of my, like, archetype that I identify with. Um, but if I
Can you
said
say
that to someone
more? But yeah, because I don't even I'm like, "Can you say more?" Because I don't know, I have something that comes to my mind when I hear that, but I wanna know what you feel.
Yeah, so I in, like, studying, like, psychology and astrology and tarot and, like, all of these pieces, um, we think about, like, archetypes, right? And so one of the archetypes is the wounded warrior, someone who has experienced a loss or a injury or a like grievance and then goes into battle or through their life through a hero's journey in vindication of that wound. And I think that when I'm thinking honestly about the arc of my life path, I've always been somebody who, even as a kid, was really fixated on justice and fairness, um, and inequality. Um, and I think that as I've come into like understanding myself more as an adult, it's like, oh, like all of these things that have happened, not just to me, but ancestrally, I think drive a lot of my fire and my worldview. Um, but a less intense answer is I would say I'm like a friend, I'm an activist, I'm a organizer, I'm a parent, um, and I'm a big like nerd. I'm a big like reader and consumer of culture and information.
Hmm. That tracks though about the wounded warrior thing for you, now that you explained it. I actually just ordered a couple books for myself, but I think to take to India, and one of them is I've never read Joseph Campbell. Like, I've never
Ooh,
read I
I
know, like,
love Joseph Campbell.
I'm familiar, but I haven't read his, like, take on the myths and the archetypes. Like, I haven't read one of his books, so I've got a couple that are coming in the mail from Thrift Books for me, which I'm really excited about. But I mean, it's so funny. I'm, like, listening to everyone's like, conversations and answers. Everyone on this podcast is kind of very into tarot, which is really funny to me 'cause, like, I'm like, "Oh, that's, like" I feel like it's, like, a characteristic of midlife women. But my favorite book about archetypes and myths is, Women Who Run with the Wolves. Have you read that? Do you know this?
No, I think you recommended it to me. I need to read it. But yeah, so I have a friend who's actually my neighbor who is a retired Presbyterian minister. And she calls herself a Presbyterian witch. So obviously we are like best friends. But she really like kind of broadened my thoughts about understanding myself through archetypes. And she's really into archetypes and symbolism as a way to better understand yourself, right? Like we and that's tarot too, right? Like it's all symbolism. And people have been doing this for thousands of years. Like we have these symbols across culture, across storytelling, across myth making. We see it in politics, right? So like we've been fed all of these messages subliminally or overtly our whole lives. So it makes sense to kind of try to like organize your thoughts and organize your whole deal into like these pieces. I don't know. I think I find it clarifying. But yeah, she was the one who kind of like really identified that for me with me.
I like, this is something I think a lot about too, like how stories and it's honestly a part of this podcast project, like why I feel really compelled to like create a space for women to tell what I'm calling their own coming of aging stories, like because that's like it's a huge number of us moving into this moment in time, and it's me and it's you, and it's like these stories are so they feel so important to me, and I think that story, like you're talking about with archetypes and myths, like and it's such a long, millennia long tradition of how we understand ourselves, how we understand each other, how we understand the world around us. So I think in that way, it's a really powerful tool of understanding and connection. And yet, I also feel like stories are really can be used divisively and also um, can make us feel more alone and feel bad, and I think it's like a format of storytelling that's just really cheap and easy right now, which is like picking up our phones and looking at like one dimension of someone's really tiny snippet of a story, and then using that as like a way that we just like feel worse or something. Like, so it's complex to me. It's complex to me in 2026.
Yeah. I mean, I'm gonna like probably viciously misquote this, but our friend Adriana Limbach has an amazing Substack and she wrote recently about her phone and her relationship with her phone, and the algorithm and the feed. And I think the quote is like, the more time I spend on my phone, the smaller my world gets. And like the more alone I am, despite being connected to all of these things and all of these people. And so I definitely feel that way as much as like, Substack and I mean, I was an old school like Tumblr live journal girly back in the day. There is real connection and community online that you can't find otherwhere. But like, I do also think we're like inundated with so much information and some of it is like a toxic narrative around like another thing I think about a lot is how millennial parents are being absolutely crippled by choice and information because we are the most educated parents in the history of the world with the most access to information, but like it can be head spinning, right? Because you can get really caught up in like what other parents are doing or what you should be doing or what influencers are doing or what pediatrician influencers are telling you to do, instead of just being present with your own kids. Um, so I think there's just like a line we all have to find because right now we're all drinking from the fire hose and our brains literally are not built for or meant to do that. Um, but I think there's also like, again, going back to the archetype of it all, I think there is a difference of like being in community and sharing stories and understanding through narrative. I just read this really awesome psychology book called Love's Executioner by Irvin Yalom, who's like one of the most famous, influential psychologists of, the past 100 years. And he's written like dozens of textbooks. He basically invented like the format for group psychotherapy. Um, so he's written all these textbooks and he was like, I wanted to write a book because people learn through stories. He's like, I could write a million textbooks and it'll never be as long lasting or influential as if I actually like turn these lessons into stories because people learn from stories and people learn from narrative. And I was like, "Oh, yeah, that's really true." And I retained so much more from that book than I did from any of his textbooks that I had to read.
That's good. I also think a part of this podcast project is really like, and I don't mean this to diminish any of us because I think we're all wonderful, but like, I think there's a lot of podcasts, a lot of places where like it's like experts, being experts on topics. And listen, there's like a role and a time and a place to like consult an expert on something for sure. But I think we've given over a lot of our like agency or like again, like you said, drinking from the fire hose. We're just like taking in all this expertise. And really, again, not to diminish us because I think we're all fabulous, but like none of us are like it's just people talking. Like you're on this podcast because you are a woman in approaching midlife. Like there's no other credential or like line item that I need to see to make your story or our conversation valid. And I think there's something really powerful about that too for us all to remember like I don't know, there's so much wisdom like right in front of us and right around us in like the real people that we are and who we get to interact with too.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's there's definitely something to this. I like the podcasts I engage with the most happen to be podcasts of like 2 friends talking, and I think that there is something about again, like, we are wired for community, and in an era of just, like, AI slop and, like, sameness, and, like, smoothing down the edges, I do think there is a desire for just, like, real conversations of people in community.
Okay, we'll end there. Um mic drop.
I mean
Yes.
it though, I don't mean to say it as, like, a soundbite, but I do think,
No,
like
it's good. It's real.
I think people want that because you can just get garbage anywhere of, like, a person in conversation with themselves or a computer, right? That's
Mhm.
not interesting.
That's not interesting. Yeah, it's not. Okay, how will you tell us how old you are and how old do you feel?
Okay. I am in this moment, I'm 38, I will be turning 39 in a couple months. Um, I feel 29. I don't feel I feel like I I can feel my, like, body aging, I feel like particularly after having 2 children and, like, surviving, like, a cancer diagnosis and treatment, I'm really feeling my age in that capacity just in terms of, like, exhaustion. Like, I just don't I've always been somebody who had really, really high energy, I'm still somebody who has really a lot of energy, I think, as I am famous for shutting down the party. Um,
I know,
but
the other night, we're like, "We're going." You're like, "I'm getting started. Bye. I'll find a ride."
no, what was really funny was the duality of me being like, "You know what? I should go home. This is" and then I was like, "Actually, no, I'm gonna stay." Um, I've always been somebody who had a lot of energy. I feel that waiting, and that is the only way in which I truly feel older is like I can feel that I do not have the same amount of energy that I had 15 years ago. That said, mentally, I I don't feel old. I don't f like, 40 felt so old to me. And, this is really apparent to me in contrast because, I just finished, getting my master's degree, and the people I was getting my master's degree with were, for the most part, between the ages of 21 and 25. So I'm like a dinosaur in their eyes, and I don't blame them because I remember I have this very, like, distinct memory of being 21, 22, moving to New York City, making new friends, and I had a friend who was turning 30, And I was like, "I can't believe I know someone that old." Oh my god, 30, like, so old, and, like, that's hilarious to me now, but that's really, like, at 22, that's what I thought. Um, and so to spend a significant amount of time in a cohort of people who are, basically half my age was really illuminating because I can see myself as, like, I in my mind, I'm in my late 20s, but to them, I'm like, "Hello, fellow kids," like, they see me completely differently. So that was, like, a fun, like, humbling experience, but there was also some of the they really wanted to hear from me in terms of, like, my experience because I had a thing that they didn't have, which is, like, I've lived a whole life, um, that they haven't yet. So but yeah, that was a real blow to my my self-image of myself as a cool, hip with it person.
Yeah. Well, here's a question, which is like, what is a narrative that you were given about a woman at the age you are now? So, like, let's just call it 40, even though I know you're 38. Like, and does that fit as to how you feel? Like, what were you told about a woman your age, or like that she should be like?
I feel like I never really had any examples of, like, older women, like, thriving, um, and I remember, like, I feel like there's a very boomer culture thing, right? Which is like, "You're over the hill at 40," right? Like, your life is over, and I really felt that way. I also, like, the first, um, couple jobs I had in media were very male dominated, and women older women were frequently pushed aside, and the women who did stick it out had to, really kind of, like, make themselves do all this stuff to make themselves look younger. I remember working for a woman who was so powerful, so successful, had had this amazing career, and she would spend hours on hair and makeup, and she was also very, like, pull the ladder up behind you, like, she never I worked for her for 3 years, she never learned my name, um, just did not care if I lived or died, despite the fact that I was always, like, getting her coffee and making her events happen and, like, handing her cue cards, um, so I didn't have a lot of examples of, like, women aging gracefully on their own terms, like, in community. There seemed to be almost like a scarcity mindset to youth, and, um, I definitely went through kind of like a little bit of a crisis 2 years ago of, like, I'm getting older, I'm not gonna be hot anymore, and what does that mean for me as I operate and move through the world? Which sounds really vain, but there is a reality of, like, you get, you know, different attention and validation based on your youth and appearance, and then that starts to narrow and then disappears eventually, right? And I kind of had this, like, confrontation with that, I guess, of, like, what does that mean for me? How do I process that? Um, and I think also, again, going back to, like, what narratives have I been fed? Like, something I have struggled with my entire adult life is the messages of, like, patriarchy that I was, like, force-fed my entire life, and how my inherent value as a woman comes from male attention. And so deprogramming that it's one thing I like to tell my clients, like, 2 things can be true, right? I can sit here all day and say that I am a feminist and I don't care what you look like, I don't care what I look like, I wanna age gracefully. I think women should, embrace their age and their appearance, and none of that should matter, and that everything is about on the inside, but I can also feel this scarcity of, sand slipping through the hourglass, to bring it back to days of our lives. Um, That this is that I'm on the downslope of youth and beauty and desire maybe. And how do I manage that as someone who has been trained to feel validated by male attention?
So I feel like we're getting to the heart of the thesis of the 40 portal, which is like this isn't the only question that I'm exploring here, but like the thesis is really that this portal of 40, which feels so real, and I don't know if you feel it yet. I started feeling it like right when I turned 39, but probably the whisperings of it came earlier. But just this tremendous recognition that like this can be an amazingly powerful and defining decade wherein we take all the things you're talking about and more, because there's other shit, and like refuse to disappear and to own the particular power. Because I do believe that like a woman in her 40s and therefore her 50s, her 60s, her 70s, her 80s, or whatever, is like one of the most potent, powerful, wise, creative, strong, and experienced, and therefore terrifying creatures in the universe. And I think that like this is the moment this is the hero's journey, right? The heroine's journey to stand in front of that and be like, no, this is I'm gonna walk through it this way and claim that instead of shirking back. And I'll tell you what I'm reading in the 40 portal submissions, because this all started the night before my 40th birthday. You were at the party. I brought this notebook and I asked the women who were under 40 to write their questions down. What are they scared of? What are their fears? What are their desires? What are their longings? What are the questions they are living? And I asked the women over 40 to tell us what they know, to share their wisdom, what they have learned and earned and burned. And I have to tell you, Amber, a lot of the women who were under 40 were writing questions to this effect. What does it mean to lose your privilege of youth? What does it mean to lose your privilege of being attractive or desirable or pretty or whatever it is? And I can't even tell you that like most of the women over 40 were not talking about that at all. It was as though it doesn't even fucking register to them because they've moved on to this much more powerful plane. And it's not that it didn't come up, it's more nuanced than that. But I will just say overall, like the data is showing that is such a concern before we turn 40. And then you talk to women in their 50s and 60s and they're like, fuck all that. Here's what I know. It's wild to me. And that's also why I think that this is like the thesis is to like share that intergenerational knowing and question, to be in conversation with each other.
Yeah, I mean, going back to like the patriarchy brainwashing of it all, right? Like there is power in this cohort, in women of a certain age, and, like, I think that is scary and has always been scary to the powers that be. Like, if we look back, like, my thing is I love to study history, because I think there's, like, an understanding of, like, how we got here, if we can understand, like, where we've been and where we've come from, and the reality is human beings used to live mainly in matriarchal societies. People think, like, the way we live now is the way it has always been, and that's not true. Um, to the point that even, like, it's really fascinating, like, in the United States, our system of government, right, the 3 branches of government, was based on a New York State indigenous tribe structure of governing, but what was different is they had a 4th pillar of government, which was the matriarchs, the grandmothers. And basically everything went through them. Yes, there was an executive, there was a leader, there was a senate, essentially a group of leaders. There was the judiciary, people who were deciding what was right and wrong, and then all of that was filtered through a council of grandmothers. And if you if from my perspective, what we are missing in our current society, in our current culture, in our current climate of making laws and making the way the world works is elderly women with a lifetime of experience of creating life and sustaining life and nurturing themselves and coming to the world from that perspective. And so I do think there is a insidious cultural thing that wants to keep us focused on what we're losing versus what we're gaining, because that keeps us from stepping into that power.
I hope this podcast gets banned. Ah, so good. Oh my god, so good. Okay, so, where do I wanna go? I mean, so
Sorry,
then
I have
what is
one
your
more really quick thing to say on that too, which is again, like studying kind of like indigenous cultures is like there is something in I think it's West African culture called the moon time, which basically is this concept of after menopause, you are at a point in your life where you are no long your life is no longer dictated by the needs of others. So the idea is that like your children are grown enough to take care of themselves. You're you're not in the early days of your relationship where you need to really be giving so much to your husband to, like, sustain that relationship. Your relationship is established, or your partner, I should say, and you're not bleeding anymore. You're not even beholden to this thing that can kinda, like, knock you down a little bit emotionally, physically, whatever. You are, for the first time in your life, on your own terms. And so when I think about, like, a North Star through the portal, I think a lot about this concept of, like, moon time, of, like, things may feel like everything is sort of shifting sand under your feet, but, like, you get to this point where, like, these responsibilities do recede, and that's when you are just left with yourself.
Yeah. I'm totally sending you this book. I mean, I think when you read Women Who Run with Wolves, I mean, it's just like I this so Clarissa Pinkola Estes is the woman who wrote the book, and it took her like decades to write. And she is a Jungian trained psychoanalyst, but she's also like a keeper of stories in her traditional matriarchal lineages that she's a part of. And like she really draws on like kind of both, it's like East meets West, kind of like taking the kind of analytical, psychoanalytical stuff and then also going further back into more traditional ways of organizing these concepts and like pulling them together. And she talks about the different 7-year cycles of women. And it's like, and then moving this into I know, because you send me my astrology chart readings and stuff like that. Like, I know. So it's like 7, 14, 21, 28, the Saturn returns, right? And then 35, and then 42, 49, 56. Like it keeps going, and all of these shift. And she talks about even how that, like, even that, like, postmenopausal thing has gradations on it too, like, there's nuances that shift every 7 years and, like, makes you even more, um, available to wisdom and, like, almost getting you back towards, like, a away from your earthly, responsibilities. It's fascinating. I'm sending you this book. Um,
Well,
so
there's also,
so
like, every 7 years, our body regenerates, like, every single cell.
yeah.
So every 7 years, you are also just wholly, on a cellular level, like, a different person.
Which I think is interesting too, because we at the earlier in our conversation, we're talking about like COVID as a marker, which is like for us, it was definitely a marker. I mean, you had what, one baby when COVID hit or like new?
My oldest was 10 months old.
Right, right. And so like this was a discontinuity in a lot of our lives as like new parents or just even in our careers, everything, how we moved up here. And now it's been 6 years almost since that began. And I think a lot of us are, like you said, reevaluating your friendships. Was that just a thing because we were all here at the same time, same place? But in reality, we're almost passing through this like big cycle of time where people have changed and we are changing and we're processing. I'm seeing that a lot too. Wow. Yeah. Um, What is one thing that your 10 years ago self would be really surprised to learn about you today?
So 10 years ago, I was 28, which is when I got married. I think, 10 years ago, I really had no concept of, um, my career change yet, which was like has been a big thing. So I think at 28, I still thought I was gonna stay on this track forever of I'm just gonna make as much money as possible. I'm gonna be the best and I'm gonna be really successful and I'm gonna feel really good about myself because people are telling me how good I am and I never have to worry about anything because I can insulate all my problems with money.
Mm,
Um, and that is just very much I have completely processed and rejected that and blown that up. So I think that would be really surprising. I mean, the revelation that, like, I needed to do that came shortly after that. Um, and then I think also, like, understanding my life as a parent. I knew I wanted to have kids at 28. I don't think I had any real conception of what that actually would functionally look like. Or that it could be as fulfilling and challenging and complicated as it is.
mhm, mhm, yes. Where do you feel the most seen, most safe, and most at home?
This is gonna sound like I'm doing the sales pitch, but in therapy, I have a very, very good therapist, and I think therapy is a and when I am with clients, I am aiming to be the safest place for them. Um, but the more fun answer I would say is on a dance floor.
I say that for you. Yeah, that's good. Um, what is your current, like, growing edge? And by that, I mean, yeah, like, where is what how did you describe it so beautifully earlier? An edgy place. Like, where are you feeling, like, the tension, the discomfort, the friction? Where do you feel like you're the lessons of, like, that you're living? What is that for you right now?
Yeah, so I the big lesson for me right now that I am being beat over the head with by the universe is slowing down and being present, which sounds really basic, but I am somebody who um my coping mechanisms revolve around busyness and creating um I don't wanna say creating value through my busyness, but finding, like, meaning in work, and that could mean lots of things. That could mean through my organizing and activism work. That can mean through being a valuable friend and community member. That can mean showing up for people, right? Like, just keeping moving, um, is one way that I stay sane. And the other is, like, physical movement, being in my body, um, whether it's through yoga, exercise, running, dancing, like, being physically in my body and moving my body allows me to regulate. And I had surgery 4 weeks ago, and I'm being forced to be still and not move and be really gentle with my body and go slow and rest. And this is coming at a time intentionally where I am not really working. I'm waiting for um my permit to be processed by the state. So I did this intentionally because I was like, "Oh, I'll have this window of time where I'm not going to really be working. That will be a good time to recover." And what is happening in actuality is I'm losing my goddamn mind because I am being forced to slow down and be still, and I can't distract myself with anything. And I am having to really just sit with myself, and that has been hard.
Yeah, I think a lot of us will really resonate with that.
And I feel like, I feel it's a gift and a curse. Like, most people don't have opportunities to slow down. I've had so many moments in my life where I'm like, "Oh, I just wish I could get off the roller coaster for a second. I just wish I could stop for a second and pause," right? Like, everybody I think has those moments. But now that I'm in that moment, I'm also kind of in a hell of my own thinking. So
Yeah. You're not asking me for a reframe, but I'm gonna share a little bit about my experience of that, which is like, because trust me, I was like, there was something in the water. Like, I was born on that achievement, kind of go, 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 hustle, hustle, hustle. And there are certainly ways that I am stretched too thin. And I'm constantly wondering, like, is this of my own making, or is this like the reality of midlife, having a really full plate? I think that's a question that I'm holding at the center of these conversations too. But I have been able over the last 12 years. I mean, it's my work in the world is to slow down and to figure out how to slow down myself and to teach people how to slow down. And I have come to reframe my own quiet daily practice, which is both a seated meditation and a written, like handwritten journaling practice. And to me at this point, like I have been able to just like, it is the most fucking luxurious part of my day, is that quiet stillness and to be alone. And the reason why I feel like this is important is because I hear this and I know this myself and I hear this from a lot of women, is like this inability to slow down or to be in that still place. And then this real tension between, why can't we experience a taste of that now and not have to like earn it for our quieter years, right? Like, where, how can we fold in these little pockets of pause? Because to me, not only feels luxurious, it feels like the way to make some music out of all the chaotic noise.
I mean, I was gonna say, I feel like you are someone who I, like, look to for inspiration on this, because I feel like you're really good at being like, "I want to do this," or, "I want to be here, and I can't. It's gonna hurt me, it's gonna take something from me, um, and I just need to, like, I need to protect my rest," and I feel like you're really good at that.
It just feels so damn good is basically what I'm trying to say. Like, and to find what that is, and to believe that it's okay to have these moments in our day where it just feels so damn good. Whatever it is, to just be with ourselves and for ourselves. And maybe it's not complete stillness, but it is like this pouring in, right? This in gathering, this filling of our own cup. And like the fact that, I guess what I'm trying to say is like, I want us all to know that we don't have to work harder to get there. We can have tastes of that in this moment too. We're allowed to, we're allowed to. All right. On that note, I'm going to read to you from the book. Then this is from someone who's over 40. To know, I know that there is so much more ahead than there is behind. I didn't die and start to shrivel like a prune. I feel more at peace with what I know and don't know than ever before. To trust. I trust that there is so much good ahead and it can be whatever the fuck I want it to be. I trust the divine and proceed unafraid. To burn. My 40s are sexy, filled with a confidence, mystery, and swagger that 20-something me would have killed for. We are not aging. We are a delight that has been simmering, spiced with the experiences that have brought us to this point, and we are ready to go. Enjoy the ride.
I absolutely love that. I wanna get that, like, tattooed on my face.
There it is, folks. Tattoo it on my forehead. Yes, that is one of my favorite submissions to the 40 portal. It's exactly the thesis, like, but being lived by a real life woman. And I am so here for it. I am so here for it. Okay. If something in this episode resonated, send it to the women in your real life who you are having these conversations with. Make sure you subscribe, make sure you like, make sure you follow along. Leave a comment or submit your portal wisdom in the Google Docs form. Okay. I need your words. We need to keep this conversation going. We have like 25 more episodes to go before this project is complete for now. And I would love for you to be a bigger part of it. One last thing before I go. If you are digging this work and you're like, I want to do more, two places you can visit. One is the40portal.com. That's a website that I just like threw up there around this work specifically. You can also find me at katherinezack.com. But the 40 portal is actually more up to date. Like this is the stuff we're doing. And there on my coaching page, I've opened up an application for one-on-one coaching clients. My next start date is going to be September of this year of 2026. That is obviously the biggest investment as a way to kind of do this work together on all the fronts. But I also have like bite-sized little ways to do this work together on that website. There's a link to my Gumroad page, which is where I sell some of my like little digital products and guided meditations and things like that. I created a guide that's called like, Are You in a Portal? And it's like a cute self-reflection, not cute, terrifyingly powerful self-reflection and journaling prompt guide to figure out like what portal you're in, how it's going for you, what it means for your life. So you can check out those resources there. And of course, over on Substack, we just launched the 40 Portal Book Club, which is like one of my favorite things ever because books are such teachers to me. And the book that I mentioned in this episode, Women Who Run with the Wolves, Genevieve, I need my copy back, please. I'll buy you one. We're gonna dive into that book over the summer. It will probably take us the entire summertime. That book is such a tome of wisdom. There's so much goodness in there. The archetypes, the stories, the healing and vivifying power of stories, and how we can understand ourselves through these archetypes and these myth-making stories. It's so, so good. So that is over on the Substack and the paid tier membership. It's $8 a month. It's a way to support the podcast. And it's also a way to like get some of this distilled wisdom from the most transformative books that I've ever read without even reading the book. I read them for you. You could read them too, but like it's the Cliff Notes and it's so much fun. So check us out on Substack. Okay, that's all I got. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Oh my gosh, what a joy to be, seriously, in your good company, in your orbit. Thank you so much for simply being here. See you next time.